Thank you all for coming out this morning. And again, a welcome to Penny Nash as our interim. I'm not going to say. Is that better? Okay, I guess I need. That's right. Can I drop the mic? Um, Penny, I know there's been a lot has been sent out about Penny, and so I'm not going to say much. Penny's coming to us from All Saints Church, where she was interim for 2 years. Prior to that, she had been at St. Stephen's as an associate. She had been at Bruton Parish and had been in Atlanta. And I think you've been ordained, how long now? 15 years. And her husband, Tom, is with us this morning also. So if you get a chance, introduce yourself to Tom as well. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Penny. And I'm going to only sit up here because if you all have some really hard questions, I'm going to have to cover for.
I know. Yeah, it did, but I don't. Now, can you hear me? No, still. Okay. All right, we'll try this. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. See, you have to do like a rock star. You have to hold it really close to your mouth. Not that I'm a rock star. Oh. Well, thank you, Harry. I'm very glad to be here. A couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that one of my favorite movies that came out 35 years ago, one of the characters said when he got to the big time, "I'm just glad to be here." Susan? Bull Durham. Okay, that's it. When Tim Robbins, Nuke Lelouch, makes it to the major leagues, that was his speech that he was taught by Crash Davis, played by Kevin Costner. I had a cutout of Kevin Costner from that movie that somebody left in my office one time. That Susan Sarandon was in the cutout, but somebody had cut her out. So it was just Kevin Costner, and it showed up in my office, and I took it home. I had a roommate, and that Kevin Costner showed up in a lot of different places in our house. I won't say where, but that was fun. Anyway, I'm just glad to be here. I'm not going to tell you my whole life story because I'm too old for that, but I'll tell you a few. I'll hit a few highlights, and then we're going to have time for some Q&A, which is going to be softballs only. Okay, no 90-mile-an-hour fastballs here. So I was born and raised in Lewisburg, North Carolina, which is 2 hours south of here. If you just go down 85 and you get off at Henderson, you will be there. It's a very rural area, about 3,000 people, and that I think includes the cows. And we had a farm and we raised cattle, and but it's a major tobacco producing county. And when I was very small, it was a fairly wealthy community in some ways, and a very, very poverty-stricken area in others, because some people owned the land that the tobacco was grown on, and some people worked the land that the tobacco was grown on. And so so that was where I grew up, and I could not wait to get out of there. Lots of people think that growing up on a farm is this idyllic life. It is not. Just FYI. And so I headed off to school, and I did lots of things, and I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, except that I sort of wanted to be a writer. And so eventually I enrolled in the creative writing program at Florida State University, and that is what my undergraduate degree is in. But in my haste to get away from my previous life, I didn't do a lot of reflection about what my future life really needed to be. And so I kind of careened around for a while. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to be when I grew up, or kind of who I was beyond what I wasn't, and all that stuff. So I was a little bit of a late bloomer, I guess, in that area. And I messed around in a few in the advertising and publishing career in New York City, and then I was a legal secretary, and then I worked at a nonprofit organization, the National Wildlife Federation. Did a few things, and then I met Tom, and I ended up sort of getting married, having kids, and that was a wonderful thing because it gave me this. No, I mean, okay, I did actually get married. Well, actually, Tom claims that we didn't get married for a really long time because we, but at that point, all right, so now I got to back up. I was raised a Southern Baptist. A lot of people say if it weren't for the Baptists and the Catholics, that the Episcopal Church would be fairly empty. So a lot of us were raised that way. I was raised a Southern Baptist during the Civil Rights era, in a very in a southern town, and it was ugly. It was ugly. And I walked away from the church. I walked away from organized religion because, in a lot of small towns, all the churches are the same, that they just kind of are. And I just said, if this is what the church is like, if the church meetings are about how we're going to keep black people from coming to our services, or about how we're not going to talk about the inequalities and the racism and the violence, and crosses were burned in people's neighborhoods when I was growing up. And if we're not going to talk about that, and if the church is not going to stand against that, then I don't want to be part of it. And so I walked away from the church for a very long time. And so when Tom and I got married, we did not get married in a church. He has his own story about church, but and he did not grow up a Southern Baptist, but also not an Episcopalian. And so we did not get married in the church. And so for a long time then, after I was ordained, Tom started feeling bad about that we hadn't gotten married in the church. And so he got to where he was telling people that we weren't really married, which was not really, that's not really how you're supposed to handle that. But also by that point, I felt like, so we got married in 1989, and right, what's going to be the deal breaker for you? Let's name that now before you get married. I don't remember what my deal breaker was, but his deal breaker was somebody who's really religious. Now, what he meant was one of those Bible thumpers, I think we used to call them. But at any rate, so we got married at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals building in Atlanta on a Friday afternoon. Invited about 12 of our closest friends, and we went on our honeymoon to England and Scotland. And during all of this time that I was not going to church and not being part of organized religion, I was still a collector of sacred music, and as well as nativity scenes. I have a big collection of nativity scenes. And so when we went to England, we went around to various churches, because that's what you do. When you go to London, you go to St. Paul's and you see the big dome, and you go to Westminster Abbey. Sorry, not yet. I'm not at Westminster Canterbury yet. Go to Westminster Abbey, and you and you go to evensong, and you do all of those things. And I did all of those things, and I had a religious experience in the cathedral in Durham. I went to see the Venerable Bede because I was an English major, right? And the Venerable Bede is buried in the cathedral in Durham, and I went there to see his tomb. And down in the basement at the cathedral are the relics of St. Cuthbert. Big story about how he was in at Lindisfarne, the holy island of Lindisfarne, and the Vikings are coming. And so they dig him up, and he goes all over the place, and he finally lands in Durham. And some of his relics are there, some part of his coffin, some of his vestments, his pectoral cross, some stuff. And so I'm seeing his stuff going, wow. And upstairs, they're singing this beautiful music, the kind of stuff that I have albums of at home. And I sort of had a little vision. In the back of my mind, I just saw the communion of saints. Like, this stuff is all connected, all of it. And the aesthetics, the music, the space was very, very important in that sort of moment. Now, I was on my honeymoon with a guy who had said, the thing that I cannot do. So I didn't tell anybody. Mostly I didn't tell him, but I didn't tell anybody. And a few years later, we showed up in the Episcopal church. He was the leader. He was the guy that kind of walked in the door first because a friend of his who was practiced law with him had become a priest, and he kept inviting him to stuff, which I think there was an ulterior motive there. But he kept inviting him to stuff, and by this time we had little kids and, all those sorts of things. And so he sort of walked back into the church first, and then I followed. And some years after that, and I got very involved. Being a Baptist, I immediately signed up for the Bible study because I knew that stuff. And discovered that the Episcopalians really kind of do Bible study a little bit different than the Southern Baptists do. And so I signed up for EFM. We have some EFM people here, yeah. I always have to do a shout out for EFM. And then my priest came to me and said, I want to talk to you. And then doors started opening, and so this is kind of how I got here. I was fortunate to be able to go to seminary at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University, which was just the next neighborhood over from our house in Atlanta, because I had little kids. And it was important to me for our family to be able to stay together while, during that formation period. And so I did that and was ordained in the Diocese of Atlanta in 2007. So and then people say, well, tell me about your call. Well, that moment in Durham Cathedral was my main call, because we all have a call. And some of us are called to different things, but we all have a call. And that was the first one. And then when I discovered in the Episcopal Church that this baptismal covenant, this thing where we all say what it is that we do, and how we are to order our lives, and how we are to treat one another, and what our beliefs are. And this whole idea of this prayer book, that this is where our beliefs are. You want to know what our theology is? Well, read the prayer book. Read the prayers. And the fact that we read lots of parts of the Bible every single Sunday instead of 2 lines that the preacher picked out because he wants to bang it into your head really hard. All of those things became very, very, they were very helpful to me to sort of reorient me toward a God who is not sitting on a cloud with a calculator and one hand on the rug, because if you started backsliding, the rug's going. To this God of creation who spoke everything into being, and who loves us as we are. So I mentioned about us not getting married in the church, and I did that big other story. So at some point after I'd been ordained for a little bit, Tom was feeling a little hot under the cover that we had, under the, collar.
This is getting too X-rated right now.
Collar. Made me snort. It was kind of bugging him that we hadn't gotten married in the church because he was just sure that somebody was going to find that offensive. I didn't find it offensive, but, And so he started talking about that we should get married in the church, that we should, that we should have some sort of a ceremony of blessing of our marriage in the church. And at that point, gay and lesbian people were not able to be married in the church. And so I said, no, that if everybody can't get married in the church, then I'm not getting married in the church because we're already married. Although we kept telling our children that we weren't. But so the year that we hit our 25th wedding anniversary, the Episcopal Church decided at its general convention, after considerable deliberation and all of the processes that we're going through, that gay and lesbians could get married in the church. And so I went back to Tom and I said, okay, we can get married now. And so we decided that we wanted to do it kind of in a special place. And so we were going on a pilgrimage to Iona. Has anybody been to, Iona is wonderful. And we were going with a group from St. Stephen's, and Gary Jones, the rector there, had asked Gary would he officiate at a blessing of our marriage in Iona, and he said sure. And we were going with John Philip Newell. Does anybody know John Philip Newell? Okay. So he was leading the this pilgrimage. And somewhat at the last minute, Gary wasn't able to go. And he said, "Oh, but don't worry, John Philip Newell will do your wedding." Like, he will? I mean, he doesn't know us. Yeah, he'll be glad to. So on the ferry, on the way over from Oban to Iona, John Philip Newell comes up to us and goes, "Hi, are you Penny and Tom? Did you bring your prayer book?" Because, he's Presbyterian. And so anyway, so in the middle of our pilgrimage walk, which was a 7-mile walk around Iona, when we got to the St. Columba's Bay, we all stopped, and everybody on the pilgrimage stood around, and Tom and I renewed our vows with John Philip Newell as the officiant. So probably we're probably still not married because he's Presbyterian. And it wasn't a church. We were outside, and it was lovely. It was lovely. So Tom and I have 2 boys. Tom has a daughter from his first marriage, who is my daughter, Sarah. And Sarah lives in Roanoke, Virginia, with her family. And then our 2 sons, Brad and Jeffrey. Brad lives here in Richmond. He's lived here for 5 years, I guess. And he works for the Virginia Department of Health. But he's also a model. He just sort of started this modeling thing recently. It's pretty interesting. He's very tall, like Tom. And then Jeff, our younger son, spent 6 years in Boston at the New England Conservatory of Music. He's a jazz performance major, but he doesn't do jazz performance. He does other things. And he now lives in Providence, Rhode Island, and is the bar manager at a fine dining restaurant in Warren on the water there. So our kids are we love our kids. They're really wonderful, and they're all so much taller than me. And so whenever you see a picture of our family, I'm the one with the dog down the bottom kind of picture, that everybody else is up here, and then I'm kind of down here. There's more that I could say about myself because, preachers love to talk about themselves. But now that Blake is back, if you have questions, Blake's going to take the microphone and you can ask him.
I'll just get my exercise. Okay, yep. Hi, Penny. I'm Susan Siegfried, and it's wonderful to have you here. And my question is, what was your journey like becoming an interim? How did you feel called to this?
Thanks for asking that. I should have gotten somebody to ask that question. So thanks for asking it first. So my very first parish blew up 8 months after I got there because the rector was removed. And I saw firsthand what happens in a parish when the leadership has to change very suddenly. And as it turned out, part of that was also about the work that had not been done before that leadership had arrived. It was a parish that had a very long time beloved rector who had left, and they had not had an interim after that, and then had brought someone into that system, and it spectacularly did not work. And so I immediately became aware of the need for interim ministry. And I did a short part-time interim while I was in Atlanta, again in a situation where someone had been sent to go on sabbatical. And so I came to fill in. So very early I got the picture. But then I also, really wanted to do regular parish ministry. And so for 10 years or so, I did that. And a few years ago, I discovered that there's actual certification for interim ministry. And as I was thinking, after I'd been ordained for about 10 years and I'd done several things in several different parishes and felt like I had gotten a fair amount of experience in a fair number of areas, that I would look into it. And so I was able to take the training to become certified, so that because I started feeling, again, that calling back to those remembrances early on about how people get hurt in these kinds of situations. And did I have something to offer to a parish that is going through that kind of upheaval and pain? So I actually, between St. Stephen's and All Saints, I did an interim in Southern Virginia for a small parish that the Bishop of Southern Virginia assigned me to, and said, yeah, this is really it. I enjoy the part about getting to know everybody and jumping into a new system and, seeing what it's all like. It's sort of like a puzzle. And I can just see where the red pieces are and where the blue pieces are and the green pieces, and then I start figuring out, well, where do they go? But I also find interim ministry to be the place where I can say, where it's my job to say, well, first of all, it's my job to tell the truth. It's my job to tell the truth. I would like to say that all clergy always tell the truth all the time, but, the leader of an organization, and sometimes a large organization especially, but any organization, finds that they may be beholden to certain shareholders. And the interim is not. And so it's my job to tell the truth, and I will do that with you. But it's also my job to remind you that God is good, that there is always enough, and that everything is going to be all right, even if it doesn't feel all right. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Great.
Good. We'll go there and then Bob.
Hi, Penny. I'm Melinda. Another Melinda. Where's the other one? Raise your hand. There we go. So, first of all, after hearing you speak today, thank you very much. I have so much confidence after all my prayers for this parish that we've been placed in the right direction, and my confidence in you and the way we're going forward has increased exponentially just today. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to say is that probably many of us have been through transition in between rectors and experienced the interim process, experienced the process of calling a rector, I wonder if Harry or Blake or you could, just since we're going to be on YouTube, explain that process for us so that everybody's kind of on board.
Thanks, Melinda. And I'll take the questions. So interim ministry has changed over the years. So a number of you may have been in an interim where somebody came in and was pretty much just a caretaker while, to keep things going until a new rector could be called. And that still sometimes is the case. But in the case when a system has suffered a trauma, which is what has happened here, then we call it intentional interim ministry. And so several things are happening at one time during an interim. The first one is just stability, just bringing stability and doing that piece around making sure the worship is still happening, making sure, that all the things, or at least most of the things, are happening the way they are. At the same time, an assessment is happening, an assessment of the systems within the church. Are they working? Are they not working? Are there problem areas? Because, and all of this is being done with the North Star being inviting a new rector into the system. But what are you inviting the new rector into? You're not going to invite a new rector into a chaotic system or a grief-stricken system or a system that is dysfunctional. I'm not saying that y'all are any or all of those things. Just that's the way this works. And so sort of making sure that the systems are functional, making sure that you're not going to invite a new rector in who's then immediately got a problem to solve that may or may not make that, make people happy with the person, that sort of thing, okay? Then, and that takes a while. Those things take a while. And also some time needs to pass. And so in this particular case, and this is true for most churches in this situation, so we're looking at a year of doing that. And at some point, we'll start doing some information gathering from you about whatever you want to talk to us about in terms of your feelings, your vision of the past, and your hopes for the future, those kinds of things. And then that sort of leads into the eventual creation of a discernment committee. We don't call them search committees now. We call them discernment committees because you are not searching for a person to fill a position. You are discerning a relationship, a pastoral relationship with someone who is going to be something more than an employee or a person who's running things. So we call it a discernment committee. And then that discernment committee will take probably about a year to do its work, to create a parish profile based on the things that you have said are important to you. Not what some small group has decided is important, but the whole parish. Not what I think is important, but what the parish is looking for, what the parish, how the parish describes itself, so that what we want is a really good match, a really good relationship that is based on transparency about who we are as a parish, and finding someone who is a fit for that. So, because they're, churches are very different. So some of them are oriented in different ways, and you can get somebody who is the best in the entire universe at this one thing, but if that's not your thing, then everybody's going to be frustrated, right? So we're looking to make that eventual match, but we're going to take our time to get there so that we can feel good about that. And now Harry's going to add some things.
Let me just, two things. Rockstar. Have you all seen the TV commercial with the Rockstar commercial yet? And it's like Ozzy Osbourne comes on and they say, you can't be a rock star. This is like you're a rock star in the office. And anyhow, I have to. Y'all know what I mean when y'all see it. It just came out. Anyhow, we are not doing this in the vacuum either. This isn't just St. James's. We've got great support from the bishop and from the diocese as we navigate through this for the next year or two kind of thing. But I also want to emphasize that the work of the church, St. James's, continues too, so that we're not just going through discernment. There will be change in the next year or so, a lot of probably obvious change, and there'll be some systemic change that won't be so obvious as well too. But the work goes on. We got Ashley and Katie are going to continue with the kids. We got Christian education, adult education. We've got outreach and missions. You know, there's a mission trip down in Our Little Roses in Honduras right now as we speak. It's a small group that went with Sarah to camps. So we're going to be continuing that kind of stuff. From the capital side, we still are working on the ramp right now, and we always want to keep that up in the forefront. So it's not like we're going to be stopping. We're going to continue to work. We're going to go through discernment. Penny's going to lead us in all that. And just I want to make sure that as you have questions or concerns, not only is Penny available, but so is the vestry. Just keep that in mind too. Gloria asked about systemic change. So there's some things that we need to figure out as far as the vestry goes. Our model, and I'll just use an example, our model of wardens coming on for a year term every year, I don't think that that's worked. I don't think it's sustainable. Too much is lost in transition between wardens. I don't know how that's going to look, but there's going to have to be something, I think, better so that new wardens come on aren't all of a sudden their learning curve is at a 90-degree angle kind of thing. That's just an example.
Melinda, does that answer your question? Okay.
I had the same question as Melinda.
Oh, okay. Great. Great. All right. Other questions? We have a few more minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess this is more probably for Harry. First of all, thanks so much for coming on board. We look forward to it. But Harry, are we going to get a breakdown? You know, I know probably things are, I don't know how fluid they are with John leaving, but yeah, it was just my understanding as a congregant that there were irreconcilable differences between the vestry and John on a number of subject matters. And are we going to get any kind of breakdown as far as what those different directions were, so that we're not, and this could just be me, maybe I've missed this and not in the know, but I just feel like we need a little bit of information, and so that we have an idea, because, you know, I've heard some rumors, and I think the longer this goes without us having just a general synopsis as far as what were some of those big differences that just couldn't be reconciled. So is that coming down the pike at all, or?
You got to understand, of course, it's a personnel issue first and foremost. We did have the godly judgment that came from Bishop Stevenson that set the parameters for St. James's to move forward, for John to move forward, and of course there was an agreement that we had to abide by. Now, the big things, I think, what I would go back is what Bishop Stevenson had said when he was here visiting with us back in May. There was a difference between what the vestry had envisioned for the future of the church and what John envisioned. a leadership void. There was, I don't want to say issues on the financial aspect, but there was just lack of oversight, I think would be a good way to put it. And these things did not happen just overnight. I mean, these were things that for a couple years, and that John had been counseled and had been talked to, and they just weren't corrected. So that there was a chasm there between what the vestry looked at for the future and what John was able or willing to do. And that's where I'm going to have to leave it.
And by the way, I invite any of you to come and see me if you want to talk. And of course, any of the vestry members too. We're going to be on YouTube, so we're not going to do a lot of detailed stuff here. And as Harry says, there's certain things that just need to remain confidential. But please do come and see me. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back to religious stuff. Oh, rock star. So, Penny, we are so glad you're here, and I echo what Melinda said, my confidence, and is it not on? How about now? It's like this, okay. So anyway, right. So anyway, we're so glad we're here. And your sermon, your first sermon, resonated with so many of us, the things we carry. And I wanted you to talk about that, about for those of us who might be thinking about these things at 2 a.m., the things we carry, because that's when it always, usually 3. I think 3 a.m. is the hour for that. The best way to wrestle with those things that we carry, is it through prayer? Is it through talking with clergy? What's your opinion on that? It was a really great, and so many comments were made. And so thank you for making that your first sermon to us.
Well, thank you, Jesus and the lectionary, for giving me the opportunity. Prayer is always the answer. And 3 a.m. prayers are particularly important. I remember, I think our rector at All Saints Atlanta, which is my home parish, I used to say, what's going to get you through the night, right? That's that same thing, because that is when it kind of happens. Letting things go is pretty complicated. I'm a big believer in therapy, in paying people to listen to me, tell them my stuff, and at conversation, finding people who you can talk to, finding people who will hold you accountable, which I think is a really important piece, because sometimes you just get into a loop where you just stay on the same thing and you just stay there. Finding someone who can hold you accountable toward moving out of that place where you are. And sometimes it's just time. It's just, eventually you wake up one day and you say, this is not driving me insane anymore. It's only bothering me a little bit. And then one day it's not bothering you at all. So, but start with prayer. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peggy Crowley, and I was the senior warden when Randy Hollerith left St. James, which was pretty tough, and when John came on board. And for your comment over there, I just, what I want to say is you all elect a vestry of 18 people. And being on the vestry is tough, and for everybody to say yes on the vestry is also tough. So what I want you to say is you elected and you nominated this vestry, and it's really hard for 18 people to check a yes box, as well as the bishop. So continue to support this vestry. Continue to support Tracy and Harry. They've had a tough job. And we're going to go forward, okay? as a team. But remember, your vestry is your people, and you have a right every year to elect this vestry. So trust your vestry. Trust Penny. We're going to be fine. St. James is going to move forward. And this is tough. And if I love John, okay, I'm sorry, but I trust them. I don't have to have a reason. When somebody is fired from a business, things happen. And so we need to go on. They did not want to pull the yes box. Trust me, I know they didn't. And so let's go on. Let's go with Penny. Let's go with our vestry and move on. Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Blake, I'm going to let you walk all the way to the back here.
Did you see who was first? Marjorie?
Hi, Penny. Is this coming through? I'm Marjorie. And my question is, if I, as a parishioner, had some issues about how things were going in the last years, is the person, or maybe there's more than one person, but should I come to you and speak to you? Should I go to Amelia or Blake? Should I go to a vestry person? Where would I start asking my question about what about the direction of this? And can we do this differently because this is my belief in how it should be done? Something like that.
Great question. So the vestry and I are your go-to people. Not that Blake and Amelia don't need to be talked to, but Blake and Amelia need to go back to be able to doing their jobs, and not to be doing interim, sort of having to step up into other stuff. So, yeah, me or Harry or Tracy or any vestry member that you're close to. Yeah. Now we're still way back in the back there. There's.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Wayne. I think my middle name should be Collaboration. And while I was in Baltimore, that was extended to Tenacious Collaborator. I think probably I can own that. I thank you for saying about transparency and being very direct with us. I really appreciate that. I also want to thank Peggy for her comment about being on vestry and the positions they're put in. I have been feeling very concerned about a number of things for quite a while, and I'm not one way or the other on, because it wasn't my call. It was our vestry's call, and we voted them in, and I believe we have to trust them that they made a spiritual and prayerful choice. Moving forward, I pray that we can be more open and discussing with all of us the decisions that are made. There were quite a lot of decisions made that I felt very left out of, missions and outreach being a biggie. So anyway, thank you.
Wait, is that not a question? Okay.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, my name is Nona Khan. I joined St. James's probably 2017, 2018, and then we had the pandemic. And so this is my first time back in quite a while. Thank you. Glad to be here. I am here specifically because before belonging to St. James's, I was a member of St. Stephen's, and my priest was Penny Nash. It was a congregation of 8,000 people. I have lived in towns smaller than the membership of St. Stephen's. But when Penny spoke with anybody, It was as if you were the only person in the room. She listens and she cares and she finds a way to make you feel part of. And so I am back specifically because we couldn't have a better person as our interim, and God is good. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mary Lou Rumble, and I don't want to be disrespectful of the vestry or any of the process that went on here, but I do want to dovetail on the gentleman. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, Dave. When we talk about confidentiality, I understand that, but I also feel that if we don't have information, there are gaps in our information, but then you might assume the worst. And I think that often happens. I mean, we were given categories, financial, pastoral, a couple of other things that were problems with John McCard. And I feel that without more information, we're not going to be able to move on. And I understand there's a conflict there because of confidentiality. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you for that. We're on YouTube, so we're not going to spend any more time on this meeting talking about this stuff, okay? We can have that conversation. I'm not trying to say we're not going to have it, but we're not going to have it right here, okay? Okay. All right, over here.
Hi, I'm the other Melinda. Penny, I would just like your perspective, and I know you've only been here a short time, but what to you is unique about our situation based on the vast interim experience that you've had?
What's unique is your parish, not your situation. Unfortunately, this is not the first time that this has happened in a parish. That's why we have a canonical process. That our canons and constitution, which are what we abide by, right? Our laws for the church, can be a blessing and a curse sometimes, but they're mostly a blessing, and that they give us a process for working through our issues. And churches, because churches are made up, the church is not the building, the church is the people, and people are fallible human beings, and even priests are fallible human beings. They try to get us to be better than we are, but sometimes we're not. And so that's why we have these processes. So the situation here has happened in other places, and we have procedures to follow. So what's unique about St. James's is St. James's as a parish, and what you do, and how the people that make up this community, and I'm grateful for that. That's the part that's fun for me, is to get to know this unique community. So I hope, in a weird kind of way, that it's reassuring that this has happened before in other places, that this isn't, that somehow, St. James's didn't get picked out of the universe to have this terrible thing happen in its midst. And we will do what we're supposed to do with people who are smarter than I am, who have created these processes for working through our stuff. I hope that answers your question. We got to go now, because there's another service. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who have come, and my door is open. I'm happy to talk with you and to hear about your concerns and your joys and just about you and your life. I'm looking forward to getting to know you. And thank you, Harry. So see you in church. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.